Solo, A Star Wars Story is the film about two comedic directors named Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were working on a Star Wars film for the longest time until the last 3 weeks of production, when they got fired by Kathleen Kennedy because she just now decided they weren't right for the job. She then hired Ron Howard to reshoot almost all of the film, around 70% of it, and now it's out in theaters, with like little anticipation or hype about it. Yay! Star Wars is back again! I think it's fair to say that I wasn't really that excited for this movie. I was interested at first because it was Phil Lord and Chris Miller making a Star Wars movie, but then when they got fired, that's when I kind of lost all interest. They basically hired Ron Howard to be a yes man. Because what I always heard was that they were fired because they were detracting too much from the script. The script is the best Star Wars script ever written by Lawrence Kasdan and his son. This script cannot be messed with, and Phil Lord and Chris Miller, they're making Star Wars a farce. So when the trailers came out, I was like, yeah, it looks cool, because Star Wars in general just looks cool. Like, freaking duh, right? I wasn't really persuaded by anything I was really seeing. There were certain things that I was looking forward to seeing how they played out, certain things I was a little scared about. Overall, there was just like no hype at all for me, and I felt like I was just walking into a rather unnecessary film. Because the reason why I was so hyped for this film at first was because of Phil Lord and Chris Miller. Not because it's a Han Solo prequel. Because we do not need a Han Solo prequel. And after seeing the movie, we never needed a Han Solo prequel. Not to say that this film is bad or anything, but overall, if I had never seen this movie, if that movie right there was never made, would I feel like I was missing something out of the Han Solo character? Would I feel like there was a portion of Han Solo's character in the original trilogy that was missing? No. Like, it's pretty much all there in the original trilogy. You do not need this film to see those and love them more. This is just a thing that popped into existence because Disney and Lucasfilm were like, we need to make more anthology films that spread away from the saga stuff. But right now, we kind of want to just focus on the stuff we know, get people to keep coming, to keep making us money, because everyone loves to see stuff that's familiar. Why don't we just make the frickin' Han Solo prequel? We can do stuff with him, right? And that's why this film is made. That being said, though, as unnecessary as this film is, it's decent. Like, it's slightly better than what I was expecting, and I was really expecting, like, straight down the middle mediocre. This is, like, a little bit more fun than mediocre, so yay, they didn't make it a disaster. Alden Ehrenreich is actually not that bad as Han Solo. I'm sure people were worried at first because he doesn't capture Harrison Ford, and I was a little worried about that too, but what you really gotta understand is that he's playing Han Solo early on in his life. Like, this is a part of Han Solo that isn't the Han Solo we know, so this is really just him getting used to this new smuggling lifestyle. So of course he's not going to be all cool, suave Harrison Ford yet. There are going to be those moments where you think, well, that doesn't seem like Han Solo, because it isn't the Han Solo we know yet, and I think Alden Ehrenreich did a really good job pulling that off. In a sense, he really did make the Han Solo character in this film his own, and that's really cool. Also, Donald Glover, fantastic as Lando Calrissian. I think he did an excellent job. There's some rumors that they're going to make a Lando movie or something like that, and as much as that's unnecessary really to me, if they do make it, I can't wait to see Donald Glover back as Lando, because he perfectly pulled off Lando's mannerisms, the way he just kind of moves his eyes and smiles at people, like, it's perfectly Lando, and the way he actually matches his voice to that of Billy D. Williams, like, that was very impressive for him, and Donald Glover is killing it lately, so to see him just be, like, this really great part of this film is just great to see how his career is just continuing to grow. Also great in this movie, Chewbacca. He's pretty badass in this movie, if you ask me, and also they deal with that friendship with Han in a pretty interesting way. If I had to have a flaw with it, though, is that it feels a little rushed, and that's kind of a big complaint I have with the first 20-30 minutes or so, is that this movie does kind of rush the beginning a little bit. Like, when Han and Chewie first meet, they kind of immediately kind of become friends in a way, and I wasn't really a huge fan of that. It felt really rushed. And also before that, when you get introduced to how Han is living right now, that also felt really rushed. It just felt like they were trying to get into the overall meat of the story, which is when all these characters like Han and Chewie and Lando and others come together, but they had to rush through this other stuff, the backstory part first. And in that backstory, at first, we get introduced to a couple characters that overall kind of disappointed me. Like, there's this character voiced by Jon Favreau, who's basically a discount Rocket Raccoon, except not as funny, not as cool. He's just a small, furry alien creature who's supposed to be funny because they give him funny lines of dialogue, but he didn't really make me laugh. He wasn't annoying, it just never made me laugh, and I didn't feel anything for his character. Also, Thandie Newton as Val, I didn't really feel anything for her at all when she was introduced, and it also doesn't help that I kinda called where her character was going to go, like, in the second scene she was in the movie, so that's not good if I can predict what's gonna happen with the character, you know? Woody Harrelson was the biggest disappointment, though, out of these characters. Once again, he didn't annoy me, but I think the potential that this character had was really not carried through well. This character does go in some interesting places that would have been more interesting if a certain thing that happened to him earlier on carried over a lot more, and you could actually see that affect his personality. But no, after this thing happens to him that's pretty traumatic earlier on, after a while, he just kind of lets that go, and he becomes a comedic relief character for the longest time. And then when stuff happens later on in the movie, you're like, I want to like this, but I feel like I would like it even more if this had felt like it was carrying over more and affecting his character. But that didn't really happen, so you're just watching Woody Harrelson in this movie, and I couldn't help but feel like he was like a third wheel. He had a couple like chuckle-worthy lines in the movie, but overall there wasn't really anything that funny about him. And that's another thing I have to say about this movie, is that the jokes in this movie kind of range from pretty funny to a lot of people have been saying, like, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, they're the ones who put in the humor, so of course that's why Kathy fired them, no wonder. I don't really know. I feel like Phil Lord and Chris Miller's sense of humor, like if you've seen the Jump Street movies and the Lego movie, I feel like they have a really specific sense of humor. And this movie, there are a few moments where I thought, that could be Lord and Miller, that could have been a Lord and Miller moment, but there really wasn't enough moments where I thought, that's Lord and Miller, all the bad jokes, it's all their fault. It kind of felt like Disney was like, alright, we fired Lord and Miller because of the jokes, but we don't want to make it seem like this movie's like really dark or anything, so we're gonna have a couple jokes in there, or something like that. Of course, maybe that's not what happened, but still, that's kind of how it felt through the execution, the way they delivered the jokes through acting. And I don't know what they were thinking, but the character of L3, I'm sorry, I thought she sucked. I usually really love the droids that they introduce into the Star Wars universe, like most recently K2SO, frickin' love them, but this girl, L3, her thing is she wants robot equal rights, and it becomes very obvious what that's all about. And all I'm gonna say is, this is not gonna bode well for Star Wars and Disney, especially with the people who like to complain that these movies have a feminist agenda. And obviously, to me, that's bullcrap, and I do not support that opinion in the slightest. I think it's stupid. But they have a character, a robot, voiced by a woman, who at one point, when asked, do you need anything, goes, equal rights, and constantly talks about robot equal rights. It's kind of hard to kind of forget that as, this is not an agenda, this was just a funny character quirk. You do realize you screwed that up for yourself, right? It also doesn't help that her character is just really unfunny. Whenever she told a joke, I kind of cringed, and I did not really care for her appearances. Emilia Clarke, though, I actually really liked in this movie, like, more than I thought I would. I was kind of expecting, like, okay, Han Solo, love interest, kind of generic feel there, but this character actually has a pretty solid story going on here, and I can't really delve into it much because of spoilers, but I really was interested to see where that character was going. It's like the only thing that actually had me interested and sort of surprised when it started to wrap up near the end of the movie. However, the character Dryden Voss, terrible. Paul Bettany I like, of course, and he didn't annoy me, obviously, but this is like a Marvel villain, pretty much. He's in like 2 or 3 scenes in the movie, barely does anything noteworthy or does anything to put you in suspense. It's just an evil dude who wants power, who wants money, and that's so bland and forgettable. But I guess we have bland and forgettable Star Wars villains in Star Wars movies now, so thanks a lot, Disney. The action sequences are a lot of fun. Obviously, we have a very capable director here who's had experience with that before, so obviously these action scenes are going to work. The visual effects are outstanding, but so are the other Star Wars movies, so it's not like I'm really saying anything new when I say the cinematography looks gorgeous, the visual effects and the mix with practical stuff, it looks great, because you all already know that. Like, I'm not saying anything new. Like, it's stuff you expect now from these Disney Star Wars movies. And of course that's not a bad thing, like good visuals and good action and fun moments and nice cinematography, like that all leads into an enjoyable film experience, so obviously keep going with that. But what I'm really trying to get at here is that this movie isn't doing anything that unexpected. And that's just okay. Like I said earlier, there's really only one thing that interested me because it kind of had nothing to do with a Solo origin, and that was kind of me going like, oh, they're actually expanding the Star Wars lore a little bit right here, and it actually kind of fits with what they've already established before. That's neat. I would like to see where that goes eventually, because the movie kind of doesn't finish that they kind of lead into a sequel, sort of. That's a little confusing, but besides from that, there really isn't anything about Solo's origin that surprised me. Like, pretty much anything you might have guessed when you watched him in the original trilogy is probably just here, and you really don't need to watch this movie. Like I said earlier, it's a very unnecessary film. But it is a fun, unnecessary film. Unfortunately, it's one that's kind of forgettable. But like I said earlier, aside from L3, there really isn't any terrible performances going on here. Alden Ehrenreich surprised me. He and Chewie had some really good chemistry, and I liked whenever he and Emilia Clarke were on screen together. They were pretty nice together. Donald Glover is fantastic. The action sequences are fun. This is a fun film you can watch, and the visual effects, I can imagine you'd watch this in 3D, and it looks pretty amazing. And the score by John Powell, it's actually pretty great, if you ask me. It's better than Michael Giacchino's from Rogue One, that was very forgettable. It's not better than Force Awakens or Last Jedi to me, but it's a very good score. But overall, besides the fact that this movie feels unnecessary, it still has its flaws with its humor. It doesn't really work as well, and I feel like maybe Lord and Miller should have just completed the film. Like, if the movie ended up bad, I feel like the film at least would have gone into several different directions that would have surprised people, and people would have been like, okay, that maybe isn't the best Star Wars movie, but they brought something to this. And I feel like bringing on Ron Howard, as great as he is a legend after all, he basically was just kind of the yes man to Lawrence Kasdan's script. Lawrence Kasdan was the one who complained, like, they're changing my script up and making it a comedy, I don't like this, so Kathy fired Lord and Miller. And then they got Ron Howard to do everything Kasdan wanted. And that just kind of makes me feel like this isn't a Lord and Miller movie, this isn't really a Ron Howard movie, it's just a Kasdan, Kennedy, Disney, Lucasfilm. It's a corporate kind of film where the studio was just a little afraid because they were making slight changes, so they were like, change it, we're doing it our way, but we're gonna have Ron Howard be in front of us while we make this thing. I'm gonna give Solo: A Star Wars Story a B-. I know I'm sounding a little harsh, and I just want to clarify that I did overall have fun with this film, definitely. Like, I expected mediocrity, and I got pleasantness out of this. Fun action, fun visuals, a few funny jokes, one near the end of the second act that actually had me frickin' dying. That's gotta be a Lord and Miller moment if you ask me. The acting was pretty good, better than people were reporting when they said people couldn't act, because that's far from it. There's actually pretty great performances here. It's just overall, there were certain characters that didn't really feel necessary or didn't really feel built up on at all. The first 20 to 30 minutes or so feels very rushed because it feels like they just want to get to the later part of the film, and that didn't really get me introduced to this part of Solo's life as well as it should have. So the movie has flaws, but it's fun. Now, slight spoiler warning at the end of this video. I was looking at Ralph the Movie Maker's Twitter, and he responded to someone who showed him this. It's Star Wars, Solo: A Star Wars Story bingo card. And I printed it out because I was so fascinated to see how many of these were right. And actually, I never got a bingo on here. I got quite a few marks on it, but I never once got a bingo on here. Han does shoot first in one scene. They do have a dice origin and a blaster origin. There's quips and there's obvious reshoot moments. I kind of just turn that into tone. Han is an orphan. Solo is not his real name, and Han does get called Kid by Woody Harrelson, which isn't exactly the same as Kiddo, but it's close enough to me. There was not really a lot of original trilogy quotes. At least I didn't notice them when I watched it. Harrison Ford does not have a cameo, thank God. Like, that is good, just leave him out of here. C-3PO and R2-D2, most importantly, don't have cameos. Neither does Greedo, Boba Fett, or Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt is mentioned at the end of the film, but he does not show up. And Emilia Clarke isn't a member of the Rebellion, she's just working with Darth frickin' Maul, so no bingos, but that's kinda good. They didn't get everything right on here, which is good, because I was expecting at least almost all of this to be filled out, but it wasn't, so good. They changed certain things so that it wasn't entirely predictable, but it's still kind of a predictable movie. Like, when certain twists go down near the end of the movie, I could kind of care less at that point because I was just watching the movie and I didn't really feel invested with it at all. But whatever. We'll move on. Episode 9's coming out next year. And The Incredibles 2 is coming out in like 2 weeks or so we can all move on from this movie. As fun as it is in the moment, and it is fun. I don't think this movie will drop in quality for me, but it's definitely not going to go up. It is what it is. It's a fun, passable, corporate film. Kind of like Jurassic World. I have fun with that movie, but it's definitely not amazing, and it is very studio feeling, if you know what I mean. But if you've seen Solo: A Star Wars Story, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.